It all started with a forgotten 911 call buried deep in the system for months. On the tape, a woman's trembling voice pleaded for her life. And then spoke the unthinkable, the name of a police officer still serving today. That single whisper could shatter careers, uncover secrets, and ignite a fight for justice. But here's the catch: an investigator has only 72 hours before the file is erased forever. The city at night looked like a giant jewel, every window blazing with neon, every billboard screaming for attention. Up high, behind glass towers, people in tuxedos clinked crystal glasses of red wine, laughing over jazz that flowed like smoke. Down on the street, though, the light never quite reached. The shadows were full of the forgotten cold, silent, invisible to everyone but themselves. Henry sat on the cracked steps of the old subway entrance, shoulders hunched beneath a ragged military jacket that had once been proud and pressed. His hair had gone gray, his beard tangled, his hands trembling from more than just the cold. Next to him, Rex's old German shepherd, a retired service dog, rested with his head on Henry's knee. Rex's brown eyes watched the blur of passing legs, searching for something that might matter. People walked by without stopping, some wrinkling their noses, others throwing quick glances like Henry and Rex were stains on the sidewalk. Just a few blocks over, Malik pressed himself into the doorway of a convenience store, clutching a battered sketchbook. 12 years old, skin dark and smooth, his eyes still carried that wide spark of a kid who hadn't given up yet. Drawing was his escape. It gave him a world where no one mocked his hair, his clothes, his skin. Tonight, while waiting for his mom to finish her shift at the diner, a group of college kids stumbled out of a bar across the street. Their laughter was sharp, ugly. One of them tossed a bottle of water at him, soaking the sketchbook in his arms. The pages bled with blurred pencil strokes. Malik's lips quivered. He bit down hard, tasting the iron of blood. He refused to cry. Maria, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a plastic bag full of clothes, pulled her 2 little kids along the sidewalk. They had just been tossed out of their apartment for falling behind on rent. Maria worked 2 jobs, housekeeping at a hotel and flipping burgers at night, but it was never enough. The kids dragged their feet, their small hands clinging to her coat. One of them finally whispered, "Mom, where do we go now?" Maria's throat tightened. She smiled, even though it hurt. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll find a place. I promise." And in the glow of a hotel across the street, where valet attendants lined up Mercedes and BMWs, Richard raised his glass. His police uniform was replaced by a tailored suit tonight, but his reputation was the same. Decorated officer, face of justice, the man reporters loved to quote. He looked like safety, like order. But behind his smile was nothing but disdain. He believed the poor were failures, veterans were burdens, kids like Malik were statistics. He didn't bother hiding it in private. To him, these people weren't lives. They were clutter. It all collided on that same night that Maria, desperate for warmth, tried to step inside the hotel lobby with her children. The security guard blocked her, sneering. "This isn't a shelter, move along." Her daughter, too tired to walk another step, began to cry. The sound echoed against the glass doors. Malik, across the street with his ruined sketchbook, froze. His heart ached in recognition. The humiliation in Maria's bowed head was the same one burning in his chest. Their eyes met for just a moment. He saw himself in her. She saw her children's future in him, on the subway steps. Henry straightened, his weak legs shaking as he thought about stepping in. Rex growled low, sensing the tension. But Henry sat back down, his jaw locked with shame. He had once been a man who saved others. Now he couldn't even save himself. High above, Richard watched it all, through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He smirked. To him, it was almost entertaining. The strong stepping over the weak, as it should be. That was the way of the world. The city exhaled a cold wind that swept down alleys and across rooftops, carrying with it the sour stink of hopelessness. But somewhere in the cracks, something small flickered: Malik's clenched fist, Maria's forced smile, Henry's stubborn eyes, Rex's loyal growl. And in a forgotten office, deep in the 911 call center, a tired employee clicked through old files. Most were static, irrelevant. Then one recording stopped her cold. "Please help me. He's Richard. Officer Richard." The woman's voice broke, desperate, and then cut off into silence. The operator pressed play again, her skin crawling. The name echoed in her ears like a warning bell, like something that had been waiting all along to be heard. What no one knew was that this broken, overlooked recording would shake the city to its core. It would drag strangers together, Henry, Maria, Malik, Rex, into a story none of them had chosen, but all of them were already part of. The night kept stretching on, and the city showed its two faces more clearly than ever. Henry leaned back against the cold stone wall of the subway entrance, his bones aching from years of battles, some on foreign soil, some inside his own head. His mind still replayed the sounds of helicopters, the ringing of gunfire, the faces of brothers in arms who never came back. People called it PTSD, but for Henry it was simply memory refusing to fade. Rex shifted beside him, the dog's warm body pressed against his leg. Sometimes Henry thought Rex was the only reason he was still alive. The dog didn't care about medals, failures, or the way society avoided them like a disease. Rex only cared about Henry, and that silent loyalty was more than Henry had gotten from most people in years. He pulled a crumpled cigarette from his pocket, but his hands trembled too much to light it. Across the street, he noticed the woman with the two kids, Maria, though he didn't know her name yet. He saw the way she stood there, back straight, even while her little girl sobbed, even while the guard dismissed her like trash. Henry muttered under his breath, "Stay strong, lady. Don't let them see you break." Rex perked his ears, as if agreeing. Malik, meanwhile, sat on the curb, flipping through his ruined sketchbook. The water stain had bled across the page, turning his carefully drawn face into a blur. He pressed the pencil harder, trying to draw over it, trying to salvage something. But the harder he pressed, the more the page tore. His chest ached, and he shut the book. For a second, he wanted to throw it in the trash. But he couldn't. The sketchbook was his voice, his way of speaking when no one wanted to listen. His mom finally appeared at the end of the street, apron still tied around her waist, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. She smiled when she saw Malik, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry I'm late, baby." "Double shift," she said. Malik nodded. He wanted to tell her about the kids who had laughed, about the sketchbook, but he stayed quiet. He didn't want to add more weight to her back. Maria had managed to find a bench for her kids to rest on, but the night was cold. She wrapped them in her coat, pulling them close to her chest, humming a song her mother used to sing when she was little. A lullaby in Spanish that spoke of stars and dreams. But all Maria could feel was the emptiness in her stomach and the fear pressing at the edges of her mind. She thought about the eviction notice, the landlord's smirk, the way people pretended not to see them as they left the building with bags in hand. She thought about her husband, long gone, who had promised to make things better. Now it was just her, and she whispered into her daughter's hair, "As long as I'm breathing, I'll find a way." Up above, in the glow of the hotel ballroom, Richard charmed his audience. He told a story about a dangerous raid he once led, how he had single-handedly kept the city safe. The crowd applauded, raising glasses in his honor. They didn't know, or didn't care, that the raid had left innocent families displaced, that some of the people swept up in the operation had been poor men guilty of nothing but sleeping in the wrong building. Richard didn't lose sleep over. He never lost sleep. To him, strength was measured by how well you could ignore the weak. Compassion, he often said privately, was for fools. But later that night, when the applause faded and the guests returned to their penthouses, Richard drove home through the city streets. He passed by Maria and her children without slowing. He saw Henry and Rex at the subway, Malik walking beside his mother. He barely noticed them. But if he had rolled down the window just a little, he might have heard Henry muttering, Maria humming, Malik whispering something to himself as he clutched his sketchbook. He might have felt for just a second that the city he thought he ruled was really holding 1,000 stories he could never understand. Instead, he pressed the gas harder, eyes fixed ahead. At the 911 call center, the young employee still sat frozen in front of the computer screen. She replayed the recording again and again, her stomach twisting. A woman's voice, frantic and terrified, calling the name of a man who still wore a badge, who still shook hands at charity events. She wondered how the call had slipped through the cracks. Was it an accident, or had someone buried it? She thought about forwarding it to her supervisor, but something told her it would disappear again. Files had a way of vanishing when powerful. Names were involved. She looked around the quiet office, then slipped a copy of the audio onto a flash drive. Her hands shook, but her gut told her this mattered. And somewhere in the city's heavy silence, threads began to pull together. Henry with his haunted eyes, Maria with her fierce determination, Malik with his hidden sketches, and Rex with his steady loyalty. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were already tied to that voice on the recording. The night passed. Morning came, flooding the streets with gray light. The city pretended to start fresh, as if the night's shadows had never existed. Men in suits grabbed coffee, women in heels hurried for trains, cars honked in endless lines. But beneath it all, the same divides remained, the rich above, the poor below. The loud drowning out the quiet. The guilty applauded while the innocent begged for warmth. And somewhere, waiting like a spark in dry grass, was a truth about to catch fire. The next morning started with the kind of light that never warmed anyone. The sun barely broke through. A blanket of gray, and the city moved as if on autopilot. Henry rose stiffly from the subway steps, his back screaming, his pockets empty except for a few coins. He shuffled toward the VA clinic, Rex trotting loyally at his side. The line outside already snaked around the block. Men with hollow eyes, women with folded arms, all waiting for medication, for paperwork, for help that never seemed to arrive. Henry stood in line, the weight of his memories pressing down. When he finally reached the counter, the nurse scanned his file, frowned and said, "We don't have your prescription on record anymore. You'll have to come back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks." For Henry, 2 weeks was an eternity. He pressed his palms against the counter, but the nurse had already moved on to the next name. Rex whined softly. Henry bent down, scratching the dog. Behind the ear, "It's fine, boy. We'll figure it out." But his voice cracked. Malik sat at the back of his classroom, sketchbook open again. He drew the streets he knew so well, broken benches, subway stairs, the tired faces of strangers who had never looked at him twice. His pencil moved quickly, capturing details nobody else noticed. The teacher walked past, glanced down, and sighed. "Malik, you need to focus on the assignment." "Not this." She snatched the sketchbook, holding it up. A few kids laughed. One boy whispered, "Looks like ghetto art to me." The laughter grew. Malik sat frozen, cheeks burning, his fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his skin. The teacher didn't stop them. She closed the book and placed it on her desk. "We'll discuss this after class." Malik lowered his head, but inside, a storm was gathering. Maria tried the community clinic with her daughter that same afternoon. The little girl had been coughing for days, her cheeks flushed with fever. Maria held her close, standing in a crowded hallway that smelled of disinfectant and despair. When her turn came, the receptionist asked for proof of address. Maria hesitated, then admitted she no longer had one. The receptionist didn't even look up from the computer. "No address. No file. We can't take her." Maria's chest tightened. She pleaded, voice shaking, "She's sick. Please, just look at her." But the woman simply repeated the rule, sliding the file back across the desk. Maria carried her daughter out, tears stinging her eyes, whispering, "Hold on, baby. Just hold on for me." Meanwhile, Richard sat in a polished office downtown, giving an interview to a local reporter. He spoke of law and order, of protecting communities, of how crime rates had dropped under his watch. The reporter scribbled eagerly, nodding. Outside the window, Maria walked past with her coughing daughter. Malik trudged behind his mother, sketchbook clutched tight. Henry limped across the street with Rex. None of them knew their lives were brushing so close to the man whose name lived in that forgotten 911 recording. And Richard, sipping his coffee, didn't spare a glance at the window. He didn't have to. His world was built high above theirs. That evening, Malik wandered to the park, sketchbook in hand. He sat on the swings, drawing Rex from memory, the way the dog had looked at him the night before, eyes full of something steady and kind. As he sketched, Rex himself appeared, padding across the grass beside Henry. Malik's eyes widened. Rex walked straight to him, tail wagging slowly, as if he recognized something in the boy. Malik reached out, tentative, and Rex pressed his head into his palm. Henry watched from a distance, his face softening. For the first time in a long while, he felt less invisible. Maria arrived at the park a few minutes later, her daughter bundled in blankets. She sat on the bench, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. Henry nodded at her, a small gesture of solidarity. Malik looked up from his sketchbook and offered a shy smile. For a moment, in the fading light, the three of them and the old dog seemed less alone. Strangers, yes, but bound by something unspoken. Then came the sound sirens wailing as a police cruiser rolled slowly by. The officers inside glanced at the park, their eyes catching on Henry's ragged clothes, on Maria's huddled children, on Malik's dark skin. One officer muttered something to the other. The car slowed. Rex stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Malik froze, his pencil still pressed to the page. Maria's arms tightened around her daughter. Henry's shoulders straightened, the old instinct to stand his ground rising again. The cruiser eventually pulled away, leaving silence in its wake. But the weight of those glances lingered, heavy and suffocating. Malik whispered, almost to himself, "They looked at us like we don't belong." Henry crouched beside Rex, murmuring, "Get used to it, kid. That's the city for you." Maria closed her eyes, rocking her daughter gently. None of them spoke of the recording. None of them knew yet how that single voice, buried in the system, would force their paths to collide in ways they couldn't imagine. But the air felt charged, as if the city itself knew a storm was coming. The night fell again, heavier than the last. The city was loud in some places, bars spilling out music and laughter, cars honking in endless jams, but strangely quiet in others. Quiet in the kind of way that pressed down on people, reminding them how small they were. Maria had found a corner behind a laundromat where the owner, an old woman who spoke little English, let her and the kids rest for the night. It wasn't safe. The air reeked of bleach and damp clothes, and the hum of machines never stopped, but it was warmer than the street. Maria laid her daughter down, stroking her hair as the child coughed herself to sleep. She thought about her son, barely older, who tried so hard to be brave. He was asleep beside his sister now, one arm draped over her like a shield. Maria felt her chest ache at the sight. She had no money left. Tomorrow she'd have to beg the diner for another shift, maybe two. Her hands were already raw from scrubbing, her feet blistered from standing, but she told herself she could do more. She had to. Henry and Rex had chosen the subway tunnel again. He leaned back against the wall, letting the vibration of passing trains rattle through him. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the pills he hadn't gotten, about the nurse's flat eyes when she told him to come back in 2 weeks. He wondered if she even remembered his name. Probably not. Rex licked his hand, dragging him out of the spiral for a moment. "You're the only one who sticks around, huh, boy?" Henry whispered. Rex's tail thumped softly in reply. Malik lay awake in his small room. His mom had collapsed into bed, too tired to eat the leftovers she'd brought home. Malik sat at his desk, sketchbook open under the weak light of a desk lamp. He drew the park, the swing set, the bench, the way Rex had looked at him. His pencil traced the curve of Maria's shoulders as she rocked her daughter, the lines of Henry's tired face, the strength in his eyes even when his body sagged. Malik didn't know why, but something about them felt connected, like threads tying them together. He drew until his hand cramped, then whispered to the paper, "Someday, people are gonna see us, not just walk past." And across the city, Richard poured himself another glass of whiskey in his penthouse. The skyline glittered outside his window. He loosened his tie, sinking into the leather couch, and scrolled through his phone. There were messages from the mayor, from donors, from journalists singing his praises. He smirked. It was good to be him. Power, money, respect, all the things he believed he had earned by stepping over others. He didn't hear the whisper of the recording playing back at the 911 call center, the woman's broken voice calling his name. He didn't feel the ground shifting under his feet. The next day, the storm clouds broke. Not in the sky, but in small human ways. Maria showed up at the diner, begging for another shift. The manager shrugged, chewing gum, and said, "I already gave your hours to someone else. You're too slow, Maria." She wanted to argue, but her daughter's fever was still burning, and she couldn't risk losing the job altogether. She bowed her head, swallowed her pride, and said, "I'll do better." The manager waved her off like a fly. Henry spent the morning at the shelter, hoping for a meal. They turned him away when they reached capacity. He watched as volunteers handed food to people who looked cleaner, who had managed to shave or tuck in their shirts. He muttered under his breath, "Guess we're not even equal when we're hungry." Rex whined, nudging his hand again. Malik went to school, bracing himself. The teacher handed back his sketchbook with a sigh. "You're wasting your time with this. Focus on math, Malik. Art won't get you out of here." He wanted to shout, to tell her that drawing was the only thing keeping him sane. But he stayed quiet. He'd learned long ago that his words didn't change anything. Instead, he filled another page, pencil scratching furiously, like if he drew hard enough, he could carve a space for himself in a world that kept pushing him out. That evening, fate pulled them together again at the park. Maria sat on the same bench, her kids curled against her. Henry shuffled by with Rex, nodding at her in greeting. Malik appeared, sketchbook in hand, his eyes lighting up when he saw Rex again. The boy dropped to his knees, hugging the dog, and for the first time that day, he smiled. Henry lowered himself onto the bench beside Maria, groaning as his knees cracked. Maria gave him a tired smile. They didn't need words. Just sitting there, sharing silence, felt like a kind of relief. Then the moment shattered. A group of teenagers walked by, loud and careless. One of them pointed at Henry and laughed. "Look at the bum and his mutt." Another gestured at Maria and the babysitter brigade. "This place is crawling with losers." Malik froze, his hand still on Rex's fur. The words stung, sharper than the bottle thrown at him days earlier. Maria's kids shrank against her, eyes wide. Henry clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He wanted to stand, to shout, to remind them he had once worn a uniform, that he had fought for their right to mock him. But the weight of years pressed him down. The teens walked on, their laughter echoing in the cold air. Malik's pencil snapped between his fingers. He didn't cry. He didn't look away. He just kept staring after them, anger burning hotter than ever. Maria reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Don't let them take your light, Mio." Her voice was soft but firm. Henry let out a long breath, muttering, "Kids got more fight than I do." Rex leaned into Malik again, tail wagging. The boy buried his face in the dog's fur, drawing strength from it. For the first time, Maria, Henry, and Malik felt less like strangers. They were people standing on the same side of a line they hadn't chosen. And somewhere in the city, that recording waited proof that the line had been drawn not just by cruel chance, but by powerful hands. The next week unfolded like a slow punishment. Maria woke before dawn, shaking her children gently awake, whispering promises she didn't know how to keep. She tried the shelter again, but the line stretched around the block. A worker walked by, clipboard in hand, and when Maria begged for a room, the woman didn't even look up. "Families with prior evictions go on the waiting list," she said. Maria wanted to scream. Her daughter coughed against her chest, tiny body trembling, and Maria swallowed the lump in her throat. She smiled at her kids anyway. "We'll keep trying." She said it like a prayer. Henry spent his morning searching for work, though his body reminded him with every step that he wasn't young anymore. He carried his discharge papers like they meant something, showing them at construction sites, warehouses, security jobs. "We're not hiring," they told him, or worse, "You're too old, too slow." The words cut deeper than the war had. By noon, he usually gave up and wandered to the park. Rex stayed close, his steady presence holding Henry together when nothing else did. Malik's drawings grew darker. He drew the kids from school, their faces twisted in cruel laughter. He drew the teacher, hands folded, eyes cold. He drew the park bench where Maria sat, the way Henry's shoulders slumped, the way his own hands clenched when the teens mocked them. He filled page after page until his pencil wore down to a stub. One night his mom found him asleep at the desk, head resting on the sketchbook. She touched his cheek, whispering, "You're too young to carry so much." But Malik was already carrying it, and Richard glided above it all. He gave speeches about cleaning up the streets, never once thinking of the faces behind those words. He told cameras, "We protect the vulnerable," while his eyes hardened every time he saw someone living in a tent. His phone buzzed with invitations. Another fundraiser, another chance to shake hands, another opportunity to rise higher. The world seemed to bend for him, but something was shifting. At the 911 call center, the young employee who'd copied the recording couldn't shake it. She played it at night, headphones pressed tight, the woman's desperate voice echoing. "Please help me. He's Richard." The fear in that voice was raw, undeniable. It wasn't static. It wasn't a prank. It was truth. And the truth terrified her. One evening, she lingered too long at her desk, staring at the file. Her supervisor walked in, eyes narrowing. "Why are you still here?" he asked. She stammered an excuse, but his gaze lingered on the screen. For a second, she thought he knew. For a second, she thought he might delete it right in front of her. Instead, he walked out, muttering about overtime. She exhaled shakily, slipping the flash drive into her pocket. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She didn't know what to do with it yet, but she knew hiding it was no longer enough. Meanwhile, the city's cruelty kept pressing in. Maria's daughter collapsed one afternoon, her fever spiking. Maria panicked, rushing her to the emergency room. She waited for hours, clutching the child in her arms, until finally a doctor came. He glanced at Maria's file, his tone clipped. "Without insurance, we can stabilize her, but long-term care isn't covered. Do you understand?" Maria nodded frantically. "Please, just help her breathe." The doctor sighed, scribbling notes, moving on like she was nothing more than another obstacle. Henry found himself cornered by two officers in the park. They demanded ID. He handed over his worn veteran's card. One of them smirked, So what? Doesn't mean you get to camp out here. They ordered him to move along, their hands resting too easily on their belts. Rex bristled, growling low. Henry pulled him back, whispering, "Not worth it, boy." But the humiliation burned. When the officers left, Henry sat on the bench, shoulders shaking. "I fought for this country," he muttered. "And this is what's left." Malik saw it happen. He sketched it all later, the cops towering over Henry, the way Rex looked ready to leap, the veterans shrinking under their gaze. He showed Maria. She touched the drawing gently, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You see us, Mio," she whispered. "You really see us." That night, the three of them sat together at the park again. Malik hunched over his sketchbook, Rex's, head resting in his lap. Maria cradled her daughter, rocking her softly. Henry stared at the stars, though the city lights dimmed most of them. For a moment, they didn't feel so alone. For a moment, it felt like maybe they belonged to each other. Then, almost like fate, the young 911 worker walked through the park. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was cutting across the city after a long shift, clutching the flash drive in her pocket, trying to decide if she was brave enough to act. She noticed them, Henry with his dog, Maria with her kids, Malik, sketching furiously. Something about the sight tugged at her chest. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the fountain nearby, her mind racing. She thought about the voice on the recording. She thought about Richard's name, about the power he held, about how easily this truth could vanish forever. She thought about the people in front of her faces the world ignored and wondered if they deserved to know. For the first time since she'd found the file, she considered opening her mouth. She sat there longer than she meant to, the flash drive burning. A hole in her pocket. The park was quieter now, the streetlights humming overhead. She watched the little boy with the sketchbook, the woman holding her sick child, the old man with his dog. None of them knew her, but somehow she felt like they already carried pieces of the recording in their lives, shadows of it, even if they didn't realize. Malik looked up first. His pencil paused, eyes curious. "You lost?" he asked. His voice was small, cautious, but it broke the silence. She shook her head. "Just cutting through." Her gaze lingered on the sketchbook. "You draw?" He nodded, flipping the book toward her. The page showed a raw scene. Two cops towering over Henry. Rex crouched low and growling. Henry's face lined with exhaustion, but still proud. It was rough, smudged, but powerful. Her throat tightened. "You're good," she said softly. "Really good." Henry eyed her warily, his instincts sharpened by years of disappointment. "What's a girl like you doing out here this late?" She hesitated. She could lie, say she missed her bus, say she lived nearby. Instead, the words slipped out before she could stop them. "I work at 911, the call center." Maria's head lifted. Even in her exhaustion, her eyes sharpened. "Emergency?" The girl nodded, fingers gripping the flash drive inside her jacket. She lowered her voice. "I found something. A call that never should have been lost." She almost stopped there, fear gnawing at her throat. But something in Maria's tired face pushed her forward. The woman on the line. She said a name, Richard, Officer Richard. The silence after was heavy, so heavy it pressed into their bones. Henry stiffened, recognizing the name instantly. Maria whispered it under her breath, her lips curling with both fear and anger. Malik just frowned, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight in the air. "Are you sure?" Henry asked, his voice low. Steady. She nodded, eyes wide. "I heard it, over and over. And they'll erase it if I don't." She trailed off, looking down at her hands. Maria's daughter stirred, coughing again, and Maria held her closer, whispering a lullaby in Spanish. When she looked back up, her gaze was fierce. "If this is true, you can't stay quiet. People need to know." "I know," the girl whispered. but he's powerful. If I speak, I could lose everything." Henry let out a hollow laugh, bitter and tired. "Lose everything? Look around. Some of us already did." The words hung in the night, sharp and painful. Malik tightened his grip on the sketchbook, his knuckles white. Maria brushed her daughter's hair back, eyes locked on the young woman. And for the first time, the 911 worker realized she wasn't alone. Maybe she wasn't the one bringing them something. They were the ones giving her the courage to act. She slid the flash drive out of her pocket, holding it tightly. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I can't carry this alone anymore." Henry's hand trembled as he reached for it, then stopped. His eyes met hers, scarred and tired, but steady. "Then don't. We'll carry it together." For a moment, in the cold glow of the streetlight, they weren't strangers anymore. They were a fragile alliance, built on shared wounds, and one whispered name. And far above, in his penthouse of glass and steel, Richard slept soundly, unaware that the walls he had built around his power were already beginning to crack. The storm didn't come with thunder or rain. It came with headlines. 2 days after the young 911 worker showed Henry, Maria, and Malik the flash drive, a news story broke. Not the recording, not yet, just another eviction gone wrong. A landlord had dragged a family out of their apartment, tossing their belongings onto the street while cops stood by, arms crossed. A neighbor filmed the scene, and the video spread fast. By morning, protesters gathered outside City Hall, their chants echoing, "Homes, not handcuffs." Maria was there, clutching her daughter's hand, Malik trailing behind with his sketchbook tucked under his arm. She hadn't planned on it, but when she heard the chants outside the laundromat, she couldn't stay away. She wanted her kids to see that their suffering wasn't invisible. She wanted to believe voices mattered. Henry came too, Rex padding beside him. He stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the signs wave, the faces twist with anger and hope. He felt the old fire stir in his chest, the fire that once made him run toward gunfire instead of away. But when a line of officers formed across from the crowd, his stomach dropped. He recognized one of them instantly. Richard stood just behind the wall of uniforms, arms crossed, his jaw tight. Malik opened his sketchbook, capturing the scene, the chants, the signs, the heavy boots of the cops. His pencil flew across the page, faster than his fear. He sketched Richard's face last, the sharp lines of power, the cold eyes that seemed to look right through the crowd. The young 911 worker wasn't in the protest, but she watched from her office window downtown, her hand gripping the flash drive in her pocket. Every chant outside made her pulse race faster. She wanted to scream the truth. She wanted to run outside and shove the recording into the hands of the protesters. But fear held her back. The clash came fast. A bottle thrown. A shove. The cops surged forward, shields and batons raised. Maria screamed, pulling her children close. Malik stumbled, dropping his sketchbook. Henry grabbed him, pulling him out of the path of the charging officer. Rex barked furiously, teeth bared, his growl lost in the chaos. Maria's daughter sobbed into her chest, coughing so hard she nearly choked. Malik reached for his sketchbook, trampled under boots, pages ripping. His drawings, his truth crushed into the dirt. He froze, heart cracking, until Henry shoved him forward. "Forget it, kid. Move." And then it happened. For a split second, Malik's eyes locked with Richard's across the chaos. Richard stood tall, untouched by the struggle, his gaze sweeping over the protesters like they were insects. Malik saw no hesitation, no shame, only disdain. He felt something shift inside him, something sharp and unyielding. He whispered to himself, "He's the one." Later that night, the park was quiet again. Maria sat on the bench, her daughter asleep in her lap. Henry leaned against the fountain, rubbing his temples. Rex curled at his feet. Malik sat hunched over, his ruined sketchbook clutched in his hands. The young 911 worker approached slowly, face pale, eyes wide. "I saw the news," she said, voice trembling. "And I can't keep this hidden anymore." She held out the flash drive. Her hand shook so badly, Maria had to steady it. "The woman on that call, she said his name, Richard. If this comes out, it could bring him down. But if they trace it to me..." Her voice cracked. "They'll destroy me." Henry's jaw clenched. "They'll destroy all of us if we stay." "Quiet." Maria nodded, fierce despite her exhaustion. "Then we don't stay quiet. We show them we exist. We show them the truth." Malik lifted his head. His eyes were red, his hands stained with pencil smudges. "I'll draw it. I'll draw everything. And when people see, they'll know." The young worker looked at him, at Maria, at Henry, at the sick child, at the old dog. She realized she wasn't giving them courage. They were giving it to her. And in that fragile moment, a pact was formed. 4 lives, 5. Counting wrecks bound together by a single voice from the past. A voice that had called out Richard's name. They didn't know yet what it would cost. But they knew one thing. Silence was no longer an option. The next day, the city buzzed with rumors. Videos from the protests spread fast, people shouting, police charging, children crying in the chaos. One clip caught Rex barking furiously, teeth bared at a line of officers, while Henry pulled Malik out of the fray. Another showed Maria shielding her daughter with her own body as an officer shoved past. Strangers online shared the clips with captions like, "This is what they call protection?" Richard dismissed it at a press conference, his voice calm, measured, the perfect mask. "Our officers acted with restraint in a difficult situation," he said, the cameras flashing. "Unfortunately, certain individuals escalated tensions." He didn't say names, but the sneer in his tone was clear. In the park that evening, Malik flipped through the remains of his sketchbook, salvaging what he could. His hand shook with anger as he traced over a torn drawing of Richard. "He lied." Malik whispered. "He's lying about all of it." Maria sat beside him, stroking her daughter's hair. "They always lie," she murmured. But her voice was different this time, less weary, more dangerous. Henry lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his tired face. "So what do we do? Shout louder? March again just so they can knock us down?" He exhaled hard. "They've got power, badges, money. All we've got are bruises." The young 911 worker pulled the flash drive from her pocket. Her hands were steady now. "Not just bruises, we have this." She set the drive on the bench like it was a weapon. Maria's eyes fixed on it. Malik leaned closer. Henry stared at it, the ember of his cigarette glowing in the dark. "Play it," Maria said. Her voice left no room for hesitation. The girl connected it to her phone, pressing play. For a moment, only static. Then the voice filled the night, a woman's voice, cracking with fear. "Please, he's going to kill me. It's Richard. Officer Richard." The words sliced through the quiet like a blade. Malik flinched. Maria's eyes widened. Henry crushed his cigarette under his boot, jaw tight. Rex whined softly, as if he too felt the weight of it. The voice cut off suddenly, replaced by silence. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The city's hum filled the gaps, the distant wail of sirens, the rumble of trains, the hiss of cars on wet pavement. Finally, Malik whispered, "It's proof." His voice shook, but his eyes burned with something fierce. "We can show everyone. We can make them see." Henry shook his head slowly. "Kid, you don't get it. Proof doesn't matter if the people in power bury it. They'll say it's fake, say we made it up. And they'll come after us for even trying. But if we don't," Maria cut in, her voice sharp, "then he wins, again." She looked at her children, then back at Henry. "I won't raise them in silence. Not anymore." The young worker tucked the flash drive back into her jacket. "I'll get it out," she said quietly. "But I can't do it alone. If they come after me, I'll need people to stand with me." To say I'm not lying. To say the call is real. Henry let out a dry laugh. So you want a homeless vet, a single mom, and a 12-year-old kid to take on the system? Maria met his eyes. Yes, because who else will? The silence stretched. Again, then Henry sighed, rubbing his face. Damn it. He looked down at Rex, who thumped his tail once, steady and sure. All right, count me in. Malik gripped his pencil like a sword. Me too, Maria nodded firmly. Then we start. Tomorrow. None of them saw the man in the shadows at the edge of the park. Phone lifted, camera recording. None of them knew that by sunrise, a grainy clip of them sitting together, whispering over something that looked suspiciously like a flash drive, would spread online under the caption, Conspiracy in the Park. And when Richard saw it over his morning coffee, his smile was sharp as glass. By sunrise, the video had already circled through local feeds, 3 adults and a kid huddled in the park, a dog at their feet, a flash drive passed between hands. The caption screamed, radicals plotting against the police. On talk radio, hosts fanned the flames. These people are exploiting tragedy for attention, one sneered. That so-called veteran? Probably a drunk. That woman? Another welfare case. And dragging a kid into it? Disgusting. Maria heard it from the laundromat, the static-filled voice of the host cutting into her bones. She clutched the basket of clothes tighter, her daughter coughing against her shoulder. People in line stared, whispers circling. She kept her chin up, but her stomach knotted with shame. Henry faced worse. When he tried to get coffee at a corner store, the clerk shook his head. Not here, man. I don't want troublemakers hanging around. Henry's cheeks burned. He wanted to shout about the years he spent overseas, about the flag sewn on his shoulder, but the words stuck. He walked out empty-handed, Rex trotting quietly behind Dot at school. Malik felt the shift too. A boy waved his phone in his face. Hey look, it's you, conspiracy boy. The laughter stabbed into him, sharper than any punch. His teacher didn't stop it. She only said, focus on your work, Malik, like he was the problem. Malik sat still, rage bubbling in his chest, his pencil snapping under his fingers. Meanwhile, Richard watched the storm from his office, sipping coffee. His advisors assured him, we're handling it. Discredit them. Call them unstable. The media will eat it up. Richard smirked. Good. By the time they even think about speaking, nobody will listen. That evening, the group met again in the park. The air was colder, their faces heavier. The young 911 worker looked pale, her hands shaking. They know, she whispered. Someone saw us last night. I think my supervisor suspects me. He asked about my hours, my files. She trailed off, eyes brimming with fear. Maria reached out, steadying her. Breathe, you're not alone. Henry clenched his fists. This is exactly what I said. They'll bury us before we even get a word out. But the call, Malik cut in, his voice trembling but fierce. We still have it. We know the truth. He looked from face to face. If we give up now, then what was the point? All the things they did to us. All the things they took. His voice cracked. I won't let him win. Henry stared at the boy, seeing fire in his eyes. That reminded him of younger soldiers he once led. Slowly, Henry nodded. Kid's right. The young worker swallowed hard. Then we have to be smart. If we go public, it can't just be me. They'll crush me. It has to be all of us together. Maria lifted her chin, resolve etched into her face. Then together it is. Across the park, unseen by them, a police cruiser idled in the shadows. An officer inside lifted a camera, zooming in. He pressed the record button, sending the feed straight back to headquarters. And in his office downtown, Richard leaned back in his chair as the grainy footage played on his laptop. His smile was thin, dangerous. All right, he said softly, almost to himself. Let's see how much noise they make when no one believes a word they say. The fallout came fast. Within days, posters appeared downtown. Grainy stills from the park, their faces blown up under bold letters. Liars, troublemakers, frauds. Maria saw one taped to the bus stop as she hurried her kids to school. Her daughter tugged her sleeve. "Mom, that's you." Maria pulled her hood low, heart hammering, and kept walking. She whispered, "Don't look, baby, just keep walking." But she couldn't unsee the way strangers glanced at her, lips curling, whispers sharp as knives. Henry tried to sign up for day labor at a construction site. The foreman squinted at him, then muttered, "You're that vet from the news, right? The one stirring up shit? Don't need that kind of attention here." Henry's jaw clenched. He wanted to scream that he wasn't a liar, that all he ever wanted was a fair chance. Instead, he turned and walked away, Rex pacing at his side, ears back as if he sensed the humiliation too. At school, Malik found his locker scrawled with the word rat. His sketchbook was gone. He searched frantically until he saw scraps of his drawings scattered in the trash, ripped to pieces. His chest tightened. The teacher only sighed when he tried to explain. "Maybe you should stay out of trouble, Malik." He sat through the rest of the day silent, fury boiling inside. The young 911 worker fared no better. Her supervisor called her in, eyes cold. "Your loyalty is being questioned. Files are missing. You've been staying late." He didn't accuse her outright, but the message was clear. One more misstep and she'd be out. And through it all, Richard's voice filled the airwaves, calm and commanding. "Misinformation is dangerous. We cannot let conspiracy theorists and agitators erode the trust between our officers and the community. We will not be intimidated." Cameras flashed. Applause followed. That night, the group gathered again in the park, battered but not broken. Maria's eyes burned with unshed tears as she whispered, "They're turning everyone against us." Henry sat heavily on the bench, rubbing his temples. "Feels like I'm fighting a war one already lost." Malik's fists clenched. "No, we can't quit. If we quit, then they win." His voice shook, but the fire in his eyes was steady. "We have the call. We have proof." The young worker nodded, though her hands trembled. "Then we have to find a way to release it where they can't bury it. Somewhere it can't disappear." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by Rex's steady breathing. Then Henry chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "Funny thing. Spent years fighting for freedom overseas, and now I've got to fight for the truth on my own damn streets." He looked at Maria, at Malik, at the worker. "All right, let's fight." Maria lifted her daughter, kissing her damp forehead. "For them," she said, "for all of us." They didn't know it yet, but the fight wouldn't just test their courage. It would tear into the cracks of their lives, forcing them to face their own prejudices, their own weaknesses, their own breaking points. And somewhere, far above in his glass tower, Richard poured himself another drink, smiling at the city lights. He thought he had them cornered. He thought he had already won. But cracks, once they appear, have a way of spreading. The city had a cruel sense of humor. 2 nights after the posters went up, Henry was woken by Rex's growl. A police cruiser sat at the edge of the park, headlights blazing. 2 officers got out, one holding a flashlight, the other smirking. "Evening, soldier," one said, his tone mocking. "Heard you're running a little conspiracy club out here." Henry sat up slowly, his knees cracking. Rex pressed close against his leg. "Just trying to sleep," he muttered. The flashlight beam hit him in the face. "Not anymore, you're not. City passed an ordinance. No camping on public property. Pack it up." Henry wanted to laugh. Pack it up. As if his entire life was anything more than a bedroll and an old dog. But he stayed silent, gathering his few belongings. Rex's low growl earned another smirk from the officer. "Careful with that mutt. Could be labeled dangerous." When they finally drove away, Henry sat back down heavily, staring at Rex. "Dangerous," he muttered. "You fought harder for this country than half of them." Rex licked his hand, as if agreeing. Meanwhile, Maria faced her own trial. She scraped together a few dollars to buy groceries, only to be humiliated at the checkout. The cashier scanned the items, then looked pointedly at the poster taped near the register. "You, that woman?" she asked, loud enough for others to hear. Maria froze. Her son stiffened at her side. The cashier's smile was tight. "You're not welcome here." Maria gathered her children, leaving the food behind. Outside, her son asked, "Why did she hate us?" Maria bit back tears. "Because people believe what they're told, even when it's a lie." At school, Malik was called to the principal's office. His mother sat stiffly in a plastic chair as the principal sighed. "We've had complaints. Parents say Malik is spreading dangerous ideas, drawing inflammatory images." Maria's jaw dropped. "He's a child. He draws what he sees." The principal folded his hands. "We're a school, not a political stage. If this continues, suspension may be necessary." Malik sat silent, fury bubbling. The principal didn't ask why he drew what he did, didn't ask what he'd lived through. Just labeled him trouble, like everyone else. That evening they met. Again at the park, Henry worn down, Maria seething, Malik stone-faced. The young 911 worker arrived late, pale and trembling. "They questioned me again," she whispered. "My supervisor. He asked if I'd been talking to anyone outside. I think they're watching me." Henry's voice was rough. "Of course they are. That's how they win, make you scared, make you doubt yourself." Maria leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Then we don't let them." She looked at Malik, at Henry, at the young worker. "We stand closer. We don't give them cracks to split us apart." But cracks were already forming. Henry's bitterness grew sharper by the day. He snapped at Malik for wandering too far, at Maria for trusting strangers, at the worker for hesitating too long. Maria's patience frayed, her voice rising when Henry's cynicism cut too deep. Malik, burning with anger, pushed against them all, his drawings darker, harsher, as if he wanted to stab the world with his pencil. And yet, despite the fights, despite the tension, they kept meeting in the park. They kept sitting together, on the same bench, breathing the same cold air, sharing the same fragile hope. Because they knew, deep down, they had no one else. One night, as Rex rested his head in Malik's lap, Maria laughed suddenly, a sharp, humorless sound. "Look at us," she said. "A vet, a single mom, a kid, a scared dispatcher. The city thinks we're a joke. Maybe we are." Henry looked at her, tired eyes softening. "Or maybe we're the only ones not asleep." The young worker stared at the flash drive in her hand, her pulse racing. "Then maybe it's time to wake everyone else up." For a moment, silence settled over them, heavy but electric. The kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. And somewhere downtown, Richard raised a glass in his penthouse. He believed he had crushed them. He didn't realize that even cracks, under enough pressure, can turn into a fracture that splits everything wide open. The week dragged on like a wound that wouldn't heal. Everywhere they turned, doors slammed shut. But then, out of nowhere, a door cracked open. It happened at the library. Maria had taken her kids there to escape the cold, letting them huddle in the children's section while she dozed in a chair. Malik wandered toward the computers, clutching the few surviving pages of his sketchbook. He wanted to scan them, to save them before they were destroyed too. An older librarian noticed him struggling with the scanner. She bent down, gentle but sharp-eyed. "Those are powerful," she said, flipping through the torn drawings. "You drew these?" Malik nodded cautiously. The woman studied the images, the police bearing down on Henry, Maria shielding her daughter, Rex barking at the posely line of uniforms. Her expression hardened. "People need to see this." Malik froze, Everyone hates us, they think we're liars. She lowered her voice. Not everyone. She tapped the desk. There are people who still listen. Sometimes you just have to know where to speak. She handed him a slip of paper. On it was a web address. Upload them here. Anonymous. They can't trace it back. That night, Malik showed the group. Henry squinted at the paper, skeptical. What is this, some blog? It's more than that, the young 911 worker said, her eyes widening. She recognized the site a place activists used when mainstream media shut them out. If we post the call there, along with Malik's drawings, it might spread faster than Richard can bury it. Maria's breath caught. But if they trace it, they won't, the worker interrupted. It's encrypted. Safer than anything else we've got. Henry leaned back, exhaling smoke. So our plan is to fight a man with a badge in a penthouse. Using a kid's drawings and a broken recording? His tone was bitter, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something like hope, something like the soldier he once was. Maria straightened, her voice firm. No, our plan is to fight him with the truth. That's all we've got, and maybe it's enough. The group fell quiet, each of them turning the thought over in their minds. The air was cold, but for the first time in weeks, it felt like the chill didn't reach their bones. Rex barked suddenly, sharp and clear, as if seconding the idea. Malik grinned for the first time in days. See? Even he agrees. They laughed real. Laughter small but real. The sound startled them, like a forgotten memory dot, and in that fragile moment, the impossible didn't seem so far away, far above. Richard leaned over his balcony, whiskey in hand, watching the city lights sprawl below. He believed the game was already over. He didn't know that in a quiet corner of the city, a handful of people he thought beneath him were about to strike the first blow. They met again in the park, but this time, something was different. The air was brittle with winter, their breath fogging in the cold. Henry rubbed his hands together, joints stiff, while Rex lay across his boots, keeping them warm. Maria sat close, her daughter curled in her lap, her son leaning on her shoulder. Malik sat cross-legged on the pavement, sketching by the light of a street lamp. The young 911 worker lingered on the edge, shifting nervously, but she stayed. The first time, none of them spoke about Richard. None of them spoke about the recording, or the posters, or the threats. Instead, they spoke about themselves. Henry started it, surprising even himself. He pulled a dented lighter from his pocket, flicking it open and shut. He said, holding it up. Carried it through 2 tours. My buddy gave it to me. Before his voice caught. He cleared his throat. Anyway, thought if I kept it, I'd never forget. But truth is, I can't forget no matter what. The sounds, the faces. Maria touched his arm gently. You came back though, that means something. Henry gave her a sad smile. Came back, sure, but to what? He gestured at the bench, at the city lights he could never touch. Feels like the war never ended, just changed shape. Silence fell, heavy and raw. Then Maria spoke. Her voice was low, but steady. I was 16 when I came here, thought America was streets of gold. My mother scrubbed floors, I followed her. Married a man who promised me better. He left. Now it's just me, and them. She nodded toward her kids. Some days I wonder if I'm strong, or just stubborn. You're strong, Malik said quickly. His eyes were fierce, certain. Stronger than anyone I know. Maria smiled at him, brushing his curls back from his forehead. The young worker shifted, hugging her knees. I grew up believing the system worked. My dad used to tell me, if you follow the rules, you'll be safe. That's why I took the job at 911. I wanted to help people. But when I found that recording, it was like the ground broke under me, like I'd been blind my whole life. She looked at Henry, at Maria, at Malik, and then I saw you. I couldn't look away. Malik glanced down at his sketchbook, then held it up. A new drawing filled the page. Henry's rough hands on the lighter, Maria's tired but determined eyes, the worker's trembling fingers holding the flash drive. In the center, Rex, drawn larger than life, his eyes steady, his body stretched like a bridge connecting them all. He handed it to them shyly. "We're not just broken pieces, we're connected like this." Henry stared at the page, his throat tightening. "Kid, you've got more truth in your pencil than they've got in all their speeches." For the first time in weeks, warmth spread between them, fragile but real. They weren't just allies bound by circumstance anymore. They were something closer, witnesses to each other's scars, keepers of each other's stories. Maria leaned back, closing her eyes, humming the lullaby again. Henry listened, his chest loosening. The young worker wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. Malik sketched another line, a small smile tugging at his lips. Rex sighed contentedly, the weight of his body grounding them all. They were still surrounded by danger, posters, whispers, surveillance, all of it pressed in. But for that one night, under the glow of the street lamp, they weren't defined by fear. They were defined by each other, and though none of them said it out loud, each felt the same unspoken truth. This bond was no longer just survival. It was strength. 2 nights later, their bond was tested. Maria had taken her kids to the corner store, clutching a handful of coins. She prayed it would be enough for bread and a carton of milk. Inside, the cashier, the same one who humiliated her before, snatched the money and shoved the bag across the counter. "Move along," he said coldly. Maria bit her tongue, her kids clinging to her skirt. She turned to leave only to find 2 men blocking the doorway. Teenagers, barely older than Malik, their faces lit by the glow of their phones. One held up the screen, sneering. "Ain't this you? The liar from the posters?" The other laughed. "Yo, you're famous. Where's your little protest club?" He reached for the bag in Maria's hand, yanking it free. Milk spilled across the floor, splattering her daughter's shoes. The girl cried out, and Maria's heart lurched out before she could react. A familiar voice cut through. "Hey!" Henry stood at the entrance, Rex by his side. His shoulders hunched but his eyes fierce. Rex's growl vibrated in the narrow aisle, low and deadly. The teenagers froze, their bravado cracking. One muttered, "Crazy old vet," before shoving past. Disappearing into the night, Maria dropped to her knees, gathering her crying daughter into her arms. Henry crouched beside her, his rough hand steady on her shoulder. "You all right?" Maria's eyes shone with tears, but her voice was steady. "We're all right, thanks to you." When they stepped outside, Malik was waiting. He had followed Henry, sketchbook under his arm, his face flushed with anger. "They can't keep doing this," he muttered. "They think they can scare us. They think we'll hide." The young 911 worker appeared a few minutes later, breathless from running. "I found a way," she said, holding up her phone. "The site, the one you told me about. If we post the call and Malik's drawings together, it'll spread. People will see the truth and the faces behind it." Henry looked skeptical. Maria wiped her daughter's tears. Malik's fists clenched tighter around his sketchbook. Finally, Henry nodded slowly. "Do it. Let's stop hiding." They gathered around the phone under a flickering streetlight. Malik uploaded the drawings, page after page of injustice, captured with raw honesty. The worker added the audio file, the woman's terrified voice naming Richard. Maria typed a single line beneath it. "We are not invisible." She hit publish. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the hum of the city, the cold wind biting their faces. Then, slowly, likes began to tick upward, shares, comments, a trickle that grew into a stream. People were watching. People were listening. Henry exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Malik smiled faintly, clutching Rex's fur. Maria pulled her kids close, whispering, "They see us now." And far across town, in his Penthouse, Richard's phone buzzed. His assistant held it out, pale. "Sir, you need to see this." Richard's smile vanished. For the first time, his grip on the city felt less certain. The post spread faster than any of them imagined. By dawn, Malik's drawings and the recording had been shared thousands of times. News sites picked it up cautiously, some labeling it unverified, others calling it explosive. For the first time, Richard's name was whispered with suspicion, but Richard didn't flinch. He struck back. By mid-morning, a press conference was called. Cameras crowded in as Richard stepped to the podium, his uniform pressed, his expression grave. "There has been a malicious attempt to smear my name and the reputation of this department," he declared. "The so-called evidence spreading online is doctored, fabricated by radicals who want to sow chaos." He held up a folder thick with papers. "These individuals are not whistleblowers. They are liars, criminals, and frauds." One by one, he listed them. Henry, labeled a violent drunk who had assaulted officers in the past. Old arrest records from bar fights were dragged into the spotlight, twisted into proof. Maria, painted as an unfit mother, her eviction records splashed across the screen. "A woman who can't even provide for her children," Richard sneered. Malik, just a child, was smeared as a troubled youth. His drawings called disturbing propaganda. The camera showed one of his sketches, torn from his locker trash, now plastered on national TV as evidence of radicalization. And the young 911 worker? Her name wasn't mentioned, but Richard claimed the audio file had been leaked by a disgruntled employee, insinuating criminal charges would follow. The room applauded. Headlines spun in real time. Police chief denies allegations. Whistleblowers discredited. Evidence fake, officials say. When Maria saw the broadcast on a diner TV, her hands shook so badly she dropped the plate. People in the booths turned to stare. She grabbed her children and fled into the street, her face burning. Henry watched from the shelter, the other men whispering around him. Guess old Hank finally snapped. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white, but he said nothing. Rex pressed against his leg, sensing the storm in his chest. At school, Malik was cornered in the hallway. "Propaganda boy," someone shouted. A teacher pulled him aside, her voice cold. "We can't protect you if you keep drawing things like that." Malik bit down on his lip until he tasted blood. And at the call center, the young workers' supervisor called her into his office. He shut the door, leaned forward, and hissed, "If you ever breathe a word of that file again, I will ruin you. Do you understand?" She nodded numbly, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat. That night, they gathered in the park again, their faces pale in the glow of the streetlights. The city felt heavier, darker, like the very air was watching them. Henry lit a cigarette, his hands shaking. "They've got everything: money, lawyers, the press. They've dug up every mistake I ever made. People will believe him." Maria held her daughter close, her voice trembling. "He called me a bad mother. He said I can't take care of them." Malik's voice cracked. "He called me dangerous. I'm just a kid." The young worker stared at the ground. "He'll come for me next. I can feel it." Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. For a moment, it felt like Richard had already won. Then Rex barked sharp, sudden, defiant. The sound echoed off the empty buildings, startling them. Malik lifted his head, wiping his face. "No, he doesn't get the last word. Not this time." Maria met Henry's eyes. Her voice was steady now. "We fight back, not with lies, with more truth. With more voices." Henry exhaled smoke, ember of his cigarette glowing. Slowly, he nodded. "Then we go bigger, louder. He wants a war, we give him one." And in the shadows of the park, a figure listened, recording their every word. By morning, the footage would be on the news. Radicals plotting against the police caught on tape. And their war would truly begin. The storm didn't pass. It only thickened. By the third day after Richard's press conference, the city was buzzing with his version of the truth. News anchors repeated his words like scripture. Social media feeds swirled with insults, memes, and doctored images. Henry passed out on a bench, Maria yelling in blurred video stills, Malik's drawings twisted into grotesque symbols. The young 911 worker's name wasn't spoken aloud, but whispers of a rogue employee circulated in online forums. The smear campaign worked. Strangers stopped them in the street with narrowed eyes. At the corner store, Maria was refused service again, this time more violently. The clerk shoved her groceries back across the counter. No handouts for liars. Her son tried to protest, but she silenced him with a hand on his arm. They left hungry, her head bowed low. Henry tried to get work at a warehouse, hoping no one would recognize him. But as soon as the foreman saw his ID, he shook his head. "We don't hire agitators." Henry wanted to shout, "I bled for this country. I buried my brothers. I'm not an agitator." Instead, he clenched his jaw, picked up his pack, and walked away with Rex at his side. Malik suffered most cruelly at school. His locker was spray-painted overnight with the word terrorist. He found his math homework shredded, his desk covered in pencil shavings and spitballs. When he told a teacher, she sighed. "Maybe if you stopped drawing such disturbing things, they'd leave you alone." Malik clenched his fist so tight his nails dug into his palms. He sat through class burning with rage, his sketchbook hidden under his desk like contraband, and the 911 worker Elena, though she rarely heard her name spoken these days, was cornered in her office by two men in suits. They flashed badges she didn't recognize. "We're investigating data breaches," one said flatly. "Stay available for questioning." When she tried to ask for details, they simply stared until she nodded. The message was clear. They were watching her. That evening, the four of them met in the park again. Their faces were pale, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. Maria rocked her daughter gently, the little girl's cough tearing through the night. Henry sat stiffly, Rex pressed close to his leg. Malik hunched over his sketchbook, drawing furiously, his lines jagged and harsh. Elena paced, her hands trembling, the flash drive still heavy in her pocket. "They've got everyone against us," Henry muttered, voice low and rough. "Every door I knock on slams shut. Nobody believes me. Nobody cares." "They care," Maria said, though her voice wavered. "Somewhere out there they care." "Where?" Henry shot back. "Because out there, all I see are people spitting at us, laughing at us, calling me a drunk, calling you unfit, calling that boy a terrorist." He jabbed a finger at Malik, whose eyes flashed. "I'm not a terrorist." Malik snapped, his voice breaking. He shoved his sketchbook at Henry. "Look at this. Does this look like terrorism?" The page showed Rex, drawn as a guardian, standing between a crowd of officers and a family huddled behind him. The lines were rough, but the truth screamed. From the paper, Henry's anger softened. He took a long drag from his cigarette, then muttered, "No, it looks like the truth. And that's why they hate it." Elena stopped pacing, her voice trembling. "They came to my office. Not Richard, not directly, but his people. They're watching me. If I slip once, I'm finished." She gripped the flash drive tighter. "Maybe I should just destroy this. Burn it. Then they'll leave us alone." "No," Maria's voice was sharp. Her daughter stirred in her arms, but she didn't stop. "That's what they want for us to give up, to disappear. If we burn it, we're doing their work for them." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. I could lose everything. My job, my apartment, my family's trust. If they fire me, I'll have nothing." Maria laughed bitterly. "Nothing? You think you know what nothing is?" She gestured at her children. "I have no home. No money. My kids cough themselves to sleep on park benches. Don't talk to me about losing everything. You haven't lost it yet." The words cut deep. Elena flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Malik scribbled furiously, the scratch of his pencil loud in the night. Then Henry spoke, his voice softer than before. "She's scared, Maria. We all are. Don't tear into her. That's what they want us turning on each other." Maria exhaled shakily, nodding. "You're right, I'm sorry." She looked at Elena, her voice gentler. "I know you're risking more than we can see, but please don't let fear win. Don't let him win." Elena wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. She slipped the flash drive back into her jacket. "All right." "I won't," Rex barked once, sharp and clear, breaking the tension. Malik smiled faintly, running his fingers through the dog's fur. "See? He knows. He knows we can't give up." They laughed, small, shaky, but real. Yet even in that fragile moment, danger lurked. Across the street, a black SUV sat parked, its engine idling. Inside, a man lifted a camera, snapping photo after photo of the group on the bench. Another man spoke into a phone. "Yeah. They're all here. We'll move soon." The trap was closing. The black SUV followed them for 3 nights straight. At first, Henry thought it was his imagination. The war had trained him to see ghosts in shadows, enemies in headlights. But on the 3rd night, as he and Rex circled the block, the SUV slid out from behind a row of parked cars and crept along at a snail's pace. Its tinted windows gave nothing away, but Henry felt the weight of eyes pressing into his back. He returned to the park, his face grim. "We're being watched," he told the others. Maria paled. "Watched? By who?" Henry didn't answer. He didn't have to. They all knew. The next day proved him right. Maria was walking her kids to the soup kitchen when a police officer stopped her on the sidewalk. He asked for her ID, his tone clipped and cold. When she hesitated, fumbling in her bag, he sneered. "Or maybe you don't belong here at all." His partner leaned in, voice low. "Best keep your head down, lady. Stop talking to the wrong people." Maria clutched her daughter tighter, dragging both children away as fast as she could. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the traffic around her. At school, Malik was pulled into the counselor's office. A uniformed officer sat in the corner, arms crossed. The counselor smiled tightly. "Malik, we're worried about you. These drawings, these ideas are making people uncomfortable. Maybe you should stop seeing those people in the park. They're not good for you." Malik's throat tightened. "They're my friends," he whispered. The officer leaned forward. "Friends? Or troublemakers? You want to end up like them, boy? Because that's where you're headed." Malik swallowed hard, his fists clenched under the desk. He said nothing. Henry didn't escape either. He was roughed up outside the shelter by 2 men in plain clothes. They pressed him against the wall, rifling through his pockets, finding nothing. One of them leaned close, breath sour with coffee. "Listen, old man. You're a drunk, a washed-up soldier, nobody's hero. Walk away while you still can. This fight isn't yours." Henry spat blood onto the pavement. "The hell it isn't." That evening, Elena arrived at the park late, her face ashen. She dropped onto the bench, clutching her phone. "They came to my apartment," she whispered. 2 men. Said they were from internal affairs. Asked if I'd been tampering with evidence. They hinted I could face charges, federal charges. My parents called me crying. They think I've ruined my life." She buried her face in her hands. "Maybe I have." For a long moment, no one spoke. The city buzzed around them, sirens wailing. Trains rattling, the murmur of lives that didn't see them, didn't care. Finally, Maria broke the silence. "They want us to be afraid. That's their weapon. Fear." Henry barked a bitter laugh. "Fear's not a weapon, it's a leash, and we're all wearing it." Malik slammed his sketchbook shut. "Then we take it off." His voice cracked, but his eyes blazed. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being called a liar. If they're gonna come after us, then let's give them a reason." Elena lifted her head, her eyes red. You don't understand. They can ruin us. Not just our names, our lives. I could go to prison. Maria's voice was soft but steady. And if you don't? If you walk away now? That woman's voice, her last words will die in the dark. Richard will keep smiling on TV, and our children will keep growing up invisible. Is that safer? Elena looked at her, her lips trembling. Henry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, smoke curling from the cigarette between his fingers. They've already taken my home, my brothers, my years. They can't take much more. But you've still got something left to lose. So you have to decide. Do you want to keep your life or live with yourself? The words hit like a hammer. Elena stared at him, then at Maria, then at Malik. Rex nudged her knee, his warm eyes steady. Slowly, shakily, she nodded. All right, I'm in. No matter what happens. Relief swept the group, fragile but real. But their resolve was tested sooner than they expected. The very next night, they returned to the park to find it surrounded. Patrol cars idled at the edges. Officers leaned against their doors, arms crossed, eyes locked on the bench. Richard wasn't there, but his presence was heavy in the air, as if every badge bore his sneer. Henry's jaw clenched. This is a message, he muttered. Maria hugged her children close, her stomach twisting. Malik's hand tightened on his sketchbook. Elena's pulse hammered in her ears as an officer approached, clipboard in hand, city ordinance. No loitering after dark. You're all in violation. His tone was flat, rehearsed. Disperse immediately or face arrest. Maria stood. We're not criminals. We're families, veterans, children. Ma'am, the officer cut her off sharply. This is your final warning. The group looked at one another. The choice was clear. Leave quietly and survive another day. Or stand their ground and risk everything. Henry dropped his cigarette, grinding it under his boot. He stood tall, shoulders squared like a soldier again. I've been warned before, he said, his voice low. Didn't stop me then. Won't stop me now. Rex barked, sharp and fierce, the sound echoing across the park. The officers tightened their grips on batons. Maria's children clung to her legs, terrified. Elena's breath came in quick gasps. Malik flipped open his sketchbook, pencil poised like a weapon, and in that frozen moment, as the night hung on the edge of violence, each of them knew there was no going back. The air was brittle as glass. Maria held her children so tightly her arms ached. Malik stood in front of her, tiny but defiant, clutching his sketchbook against his chest as if it were a shield. Henry planted his feet wide, shoulders squared like a soldier ready for orders. Rex pressed against his leg, ears back, teeth bared. Elena trembled, her breath shallow, one hand clutching the flash drive hidden in her pocket. The officer's voice rang out again. This is your last warning. Disperse, now. No one moved. For a heartbeat, silence stretched so thin it felt like it would snap. Then Henry stepped forward. His voice was rough but steady. You want us gone? Fine. But you don't get to erase us. Not tonight. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled notebook, pages yellowed with age. He held it high. These are names, my brothers. Soldiers who died believing they were protecting freedom. And this, he gestured at Maria, Malik, Elena, Rex. This is what freedom looks like. People standing together, even when the world says they don't matter. The officers shifted uneasily. One sneered, but his grip on the baton faltered. Maria lifted her chin. You call me unfit. You say I can't care for my children. But they are alive because I fight every day. They are fed because I beg, because I work until my hands bleed. That doesn't make me unfit, it makes me a mother. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. Malik stepped forward, small body trembling. He held up his sketchbook, flipping it open to the latest page. A drawing of the very scene they stood in now. Officers looming, batons ready, and in the center, a family holding their ground. He held it up high. This is what you're afraid of. Not me, not her, not him. The truth. You can't erase it. Elena's knees shook, but she forced herself forward too. Her hand gripped the flash drive so tightly her knuckles turned white. She raised it in the air. This is proof. You can take my job, you can take my home, but you can't take this back. You can't silence a dead woman's voice. The officers hesitated. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalks murmured louder now, phones lifted, cameras rolling. The city that had ignored them was watching. Richard wasn't there, but his presence weighed on the night. Somewhere in some glass tower, he was surely watching too. The officer at the front barked, "Enough! Arrest them!" Two men surged forward. Rex lunged, teeth snapping, forcing them back. Henry grabbed Malik, shielding him with his body. Maria pulled her children close, shouting, "Don't touch them!" Elena stumbled backward, clutching the flash drive like it was holy. Hands grabbed Henry, shoving him to the ground. Rex snarled, but a baton swung, striking his flank. The dog yelped, collapsing. Henry roared, fury tearing through his chest, struggling against the weight of the officers. Maria's children screamed as an officer reached for her. She clawed back, nails raking skin, her voice hoarse with rage. "Don't you dare touch them!" Malik dropped his sketchbook in the chaos. Pages fluttered across the ground like wounded. Birds, his drawings scattering into the street. Strangers bent to pick them up, staring at the raw truth in graphite. Hungry children, weary veterans, cold eyes behind badges. Someone shouted, "Look at this! Look at what they've been saying!" Elena fell to her knees, clutching the flash drive, tears streaking her face. She screamed, "Listen, there's a call." A woman's last words, "He did this, Richard did this." Her voice cracked, but it carried. Phones lifted higher. Murmurs grew into shouts. The officers faltered. They weren't prepared for the crowd. To turn, "Not tonight. Release them." Someone yelled from the sidewalk. "Let them speak." Another joined in. "We saw the drawings. We heard the call." The pressure shifted. What began as a small crowd swelled. Dozens, then hundreds. Strangers who had ignored them days ago now raised their voices. The officers hesitated, unsure. Finally, the commanding officer snarled, "Fall back." Reluctantly, they released Henry, who staggered to his feet, blood on his lip. Rex limped to his side, pressing against him, tail weak but wagging. Maria clutched her children, tears streaming down her face. Malik scrambled to gather his scattered pages, strangers helping him, handing them back reverently. Elena stood shakily, raising the flash drive again. The crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, they weren't invisible. For the first time, their voices weren't drowned, but Henry knew better than to think they had won. He wiped the blood from his mouth, eyes scanning the retreating officers. "This isn't over," he muttered. This was just the first shot. Elena's hand shook as she lowered the flash drive. "Then we'd better be ready for the war." Maria hugged her children tighter, whispering, "We're not alone anymore." Malik clutched his sketchbook to his chest, pages bent but safe. He whispered to himself, almost in awe, "They saw us." And far above, Richard smashed a glass against the wall of his penthouse, whiskey splattering across the floor. His smile was gone, replaced by a cold fury. If they wanted war, he would give them one. The park never looked the same again. Where once it was a forgotten patch of cracked benches and flickering lamps, now it was the epicenter of something larger. People came with candles, with signs, with questions. They came because they had seen the footage on their phones, Henry bloodied but unbroken, Maria clutching her children, Malik holding up his sketches, Elena crying out about the voice on the call. The story had spread like wildfire. It wasn't the news channels, they stayed silent, bought and muzzled by Richard's influence. It was the streets. The kids at Malik's school whispered his name like he was a hero. Strangers stopped Maria in the soup kitchen line, pressing food into her hands. Veterans Henry had never met showed up, saluting him, calling him brother. For the first time, the forgotten were seen. But visibility came at a cost. Richard moved faster than any of them could imagine. Lawsuits appeared. Elena received a formal notice of investigation, accusing her of breaching confidentiality, of manipulating evidence. Henry's small veterans check was suddenly under review. Maria's name was placed on a list at the shelter. She was told there might not be space for her family anymore. And Malik. He was pulled out of class, his drawings confiscated, his teacher telling him he was disruptive. He came home with fists clenched, muttering that maybe the officer had been right, maybe he was trouble. The pressure was suffocating. At night, they gathered in the park again. Not always in the open. Sometimes in shadows, whispering like conspirators. The air smelled of wet grass, of cigarette smoke, of fear barely held in check. Elena held the flash drive tightly, as though it might slip away if she let go for even a moment. It doesn't matter if we have the truth, she whispered. They'll bury us before they let it see daylight. Henry shook his head. They can't bury what the people already know. The voice is out there now. The sketches. The footage. You can't unsee what's been seen. But they can discredit us, Elena snapped. They'll call me unstable, a liar. They'll call you a washed-up drunk. They'll call Malik a delinquent. They'll call Maria unfit. And people will believe them, because it's easier. Maria's voice was tired but firm. Then we give them no choice. We keep standing. We don't stop showing up. Henry let out a long, rough laugh. Standing's easy when you've got nothing left to lose. His eyes softened, landing on Maria's children. But you've still got them. Silence hung heavy between them. Malik broke it with a whisper. What if? What if we show them everything, all at once? The call, the drawings, the names. What if we flood it? Not through the news, through us. Through everyone we can reach. Elena looked at him. The boy's eyes shone with the kind of defiance only youth could hold, sharp and uncorrupted. Slowly she nodded. A release. Not to one source. To all of them, Maria frowned. And then what? They'll still come for us. Yes, Elena said softly, but maybe they'll have to answer. Maybe the people won't let it be buried. Henry lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the scars on his weathered face. He exhaled smoke, watching it curl into the night. Then let's make sure it burns so bright they can't look away. The next days blurred into a storm of movement. Malik scanned his sketches. Maria recorded her story in her own voice. Henry read the names of his brothers aloud, his voice gravel but steady. And Elena uploaded the 911 call unedited, raw, the victim's final trembling plea. Naming Richard's officer, they sent it everywhere. To activists, to anonymous forums, to church groups, to veteran circles, to every phone number Elena dared to trust. The city trembled under the weight of it. Crowds gathered outside police headquarters, holding signs with Malik's drawings. Enlarged and printed. Henry's words echoed through megaphones. Maria's tear-streaked face was painted on walls, her voice booming from car radios. And always, beneath it all, that single haunting recording, Officer Richard. He's here, please, God help me. Before it cut to silence, the city could no longer pretend not to hear. But Richard did not bend. He appeared on television, immaculate in a dark suit, his smile perfectly measured. It's tragic, he said smoothly, that desperate people would fabricate such lies. We honor our veterans, our families, our children. But there are always those who exploit tragedy for attention. His words dripped like poison, polished and rehearsed. Yet behind him, on the split screens, the protests grew. And the park, their park, became a symbol. Candles lit each night. People gathered, not just the poor, but teachers, nurses, cab drivers, veterans, children. each carrying their own scars of being unseen, unheard. For the first time, Richard faced a city that no longer looked away. One night, as the candles flickered and chants rose, Henry leaned close to Elena. His voice was low, almost lost in the noise. They'll come harder now. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. Elena's eyes burned with exhaustion, but also something else, something harder, sharper. Then we'll be ready. Rex barked once, deep and steady, as if sealing the vow. And in the glow of the candles, in the roar of voices rising together, the forgotten stood tall, not alone, not anymore. But even as hope sparked, the storm darkened. On the horizon. Richard was not a man who lost. Richard did not roar when cornered. He smiled. That was what made him dangerous. Behind the cameras he doubled down, feeding talking points to the press, slipping money into hands, planting stories that painted Henry as unstable, Maria as negligent, Elena as delusional. He said nothing about Malik, because what could you say about a child holding a pencil against an empire? You silence him instead. And that's what he tried. One morning, Maria woke to the sound of pounding on the shelter door. Officers with clipboards stood waiting, papers in hand. Inspection, they barked. By the afternoon, the shelter's license was revoked, citing unsafe conditions. Families were pushed onto the street, children crying, mothers pleading. Maria clutched her kid's hands, staring into the officer's cold eyes. She knew exactly whose hand was behind it. Henry was dragged into hearings, his military benefits stripped under claims of fraud. The same government he bled for now erased him with a rubber stamp. He stood outside the office after, letter trembling in his hand, anger and shame battling in his chest. Rex pressed against his leg, steady, the only thing holding him upright. Elena returned home one evening to find her apartment door pried open, drawers pulled out, her files gone. On the table, a single note. Stop, or next time we won't be so polite. Her hands shook as she read it, but her jaw tightened. She stuffed what little she had left into a backpack and left, not looking back. Malik was pulled aside at school, his backpack searched. His sketches were torn. His teacher whispered, "Maybe you should stop drawing those things." That night, he sat in the park, staring at his empty pages, hands trembling. Maria tried to comfort him, but the boy looked away, ashamed of tears. Richard's shadow fell over them all, and yet something shifted. The protests didn't stop. The park remained alive. People lit more candles, brought more food, stood closer together. The stories of Maria, Henry, Elena, Malik, and Rex spread like cracks in a wall too old to hold. Still Richard was patient. He waited for one blow to end it all. It came on a Friday night. The park was crowded, hundreds of people gathered, chanting, holding up Malik's sketches on cardboard signs. Maria stood at the front with her children. Henry leaned on Rex, scars lit by candlelight. Elena held the flash drive like a talisman, and then the floodlights hit. Armored trucks rolled in, black uniforms spilling out. Not the regular officers, they had been deemed too lenient. This was Richard's private army, men with faces covered, shields gleaming, boots pounding the earth. The crowd went silent, then broke into shouts. Maria pulled her children close. Henry straightened, though his knees shook. Elena's stomach dropped, bile rising in her throat. Malik's hand shook as he clutched his sketchbook, too scared to draw. The loudspeaker crackled. "This gathering is unlawful. Disperse immediately, or face force." But no one moved. Henry muttered, "They're going to break us tonight." His voice was steady, not defeated, but certain. Elena whispered, "Then we can't let them." The soldiers advanced, shields up, batons raised. Panic rippled through the crowd. Children cried, someone screamed. But then Malik stepped forward, small, shaking, but unyielding. He lifted a fresh sketch, lines drawn with frantic hands, armored men against candles, faceless against human faces. He held it high. "Look at them," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Look at what they're doing." For a moment, silence. Then someone lifted their phone. Another followed. Soon the whole park glowed, not just with candles, but with cameras. Henry stepped forward too, ripping his shirt open, revealing scars across his chest. Bullet wounds faded to pale ridges. He shouted, "This is what they gave me for fighting their wars. And now they call me a liar?" His voice thundered, carrying across the park. Maria, tears streaming, lifted her daughter's small hand. "She is not a threat. She is a child. And still, you point your weapons at her?" Elena raised the flash drive. "This holds the voice of the dead, the truth you've tried to bury. And every second you stand here with those weapons, you prove us right." The soldiers hesitated. Some faltered. But their commander barked, "Advance!" Chaos erupted. Baton swung, candles scattered. People screamed. Rex lunged, teeth snapping at shields, forcing them back. Henry swung with fists like hammers, each blow fueled by years of betrayal. Maria shielded her children with her body, her voice hoarse from shouting. Malik dropped to his knees, sketching frantically, even as boots thundered around him, his pencil scratching the truth in real time. Elena clutched the flash drive, praying, crying, fighting to hold it above the crushed at it. Was madness. But then something unexpected. One soldier, young mask half slipping, froze. His eyes met Malik's. For a heartbeat, he saw not an enemy, not a protester, but a boy, shaking, drawing with everything he had left. The soldier lowered his baton. Another saw Henry's scars and faltered. Another saw Maria clutching her children, and stepped back. The wall cracked. Shouts rose not from the soldiers, but from the crowd. "Shame! Shame!" Cameras caught everything. The world saw. The soldiers wavered. Their commander roared, but his voice was drowned. And then, like a tide breaking, a line of them dropped their shields. Richard had miscalculated, because fear only works when no one is watching. That night, the park didn't fall. It stood, bruised, bloodied, trembling, but unbroken. By dawn, the city was different. News outlets could no longer ignore it. The videos had spread worldwide. Malik's trembling voice, Henry's scars, Maria shielding her children, Elena holding the flash drive, Rex lunging against shields. And then the moment soldiers dropped their weapons, choosing conscience over command. No headline could spin that away. For the first time, Richard's smile cracked. He appeared again, his voice calm but his eyes wild. "This is an attack on law and order," he declared. But his words felt thin now, hollow. The city had seen. The world had seen. The mayor called for an investigation. Senators demanded answers. The officer's name, whispered in the recording, now echoed through every screen. And Richard, his empire of silence and fear, suddenly stood, naked under the light. But the victory was not clean. Henry sat on the park bench, ribs aching, knuckles raw. Rex lay beside him, chest rising and falling slow, a gash across his ear. Maria tended to him with trembling hands, while her children clung to her waist. "We won, didn't we?" Malik asked softly. He sat on the ground, sketchbook in his lap, lines smudged with dirt and blood. Henry let out a bitter laugh. "Won? Kid, we survived." He paused, looking at Malik's wide, bruised face. "But maybe that's the first kind of winning." Elena dropped beside them, her eyes rimmed red. She opened her laptop with shaking hands, showing the world's headlines scrolling endlessly. 911 call, exposes officer. Veteran speaks truth. City divided but awake. Maria whispered, "It's out. They can't take it back." But Elena only nodded, her face unreadable. "They'll try anyway. Richard's not done. Men like him don't walk away quietly." True enough, by evening, rumors spread. Richard was under review, but not yet removed. Some still defended him, calling the movement chaos, calling the voices lies. The fight wasn't over, but something had shifted. The park wasn't just a park anymore. It had become a meeting ground, a place of defiance, a place of belonging. People came not just to protest, but to care, sharing food, patching wounds, telling stories. A nurse stitched Henry's hand. A baker gave bread to Maria. Kids sat in a circle, listening to Malik read his sketches aloud like scripture. For the first time, the forgotten weren't alone. A week later, subpoenas landed on Richard's desk. The officer named in the recording was arrested. Richard himself was called to testify. Cameras swarmed his mansion gates, once a fortress, now a cage. On the night before his hearing, he stood in his study, glass of whiskey untouched, staring at his reflection. For decades, fear had obeyed him. Now he saw cracks in the mirror, age, doubt, the echo of that child's voice on the call. Officer Richard. He's here, please. God help me. He smashed the glass. But the voice remained. The day of the hearing. Elena sat in the courthouse with Maria, Henry, and Malik. The room smelled of old wood and sweat. Cameras flashed. Richard entered in a tailored suit, but the confidence in his stride faltered. He looked at Henry, scarred but unbowed. At Maria, poor but proud. At Malik, child but unbroken. At Elena, small but unyielding. And for the first time, he blinked. The prosecutor played the call. The room went silent. That desperate voice, trembling, choking, naming Richard's officer, begging for life. It was unbearable. Maria sobbed quietly. Malik gripped her hand. Henry closed his eyes, jaw tight. Elena watched Richard's face. He didn't smile this time, when the tape ended. The silence was heavier than any gavel. Richard opened his mouth. For once, no words came. The trial stretched weeks. Deals were cut, secrets spilled, systems unraveled. Richard was stripped of his title, his wealth dissected, his empire crumbling under the weight of exposure. But still he lived in comfort. Compared to those he crushed, it was not the clean justice some dreamed of, but the park still burned with candles. The voices still rose. And that mattered more. Months later, Henry found steady work at a veteran center. His benefits were restored. But more than that, he had brothers beside him again. Rex lay at his feet, scarred ear twitching, a living reminder that loyalty had teeth. Maria moved into a small apartment, the first door she could lock in years. Her children painted the walls bright yellow. She still struggled. Money was thin, but she no longer stood in lines alone. Malik became something else entirely. His sketches filled the city on walls, in schools, even in courtrooms. He drew not heroes or villains, but truth. His pencil became a weapon sharper than any baton. And Elena? She kept fighting, not just this case, but others. She became a name. Whispered not with fear, but with hope. Her phone never stopped ringing, other voices, other stories, begging not to be lost. One night, months after it all, they met again in the park. No riot, no soldiers. Just candles flickering, families laughing, a stray dog chasing children. Henry leaned back on the bench, exhaling smoke. Never thought I'd see this place peaceful again. Maria smiled faintly. It's not peace. It's the beginning of something else. Malik was sketching as always. He looked up. Do you think it lasts? Elena stared at the horizon, the city skyline glowing faintly. Maybe not forever. But long enough. Long enough to matter. Rex barked softly, as if agreeing. They sat together in silence, not broken people, not forgotten. Just human. Maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The candles flickered. The night breathed. The last words of the recording still haunted them, but no longer as a wound. Now it was a reminder. A voice silenced had sparked a chorus. And this time, the world had listened. Winter melted into spring. On the courthouse steps, flowers bloomed where candles once burned. Strangers still came, some to mourn, some to pray, some just to stand in silence. One evening, Malik returned with his mother. He carried his sketchbook, now frayed and filled to bursting. He knelt at the top step and opened it to the first page. The drawing of that night. Officers looming. His family standing small but unbroken. He laid it gently on the stone. The wind tugged the page, lifting it slightly, then pressing it flat. As if the city itself was reading. Maria touched his shoulder. "Why this one?" Malik whispered. "Because this is where they saw us." Down the steps, Henry arrived, Rex limping at his side, a quiet sentinel. Elena followed, her briefcase heavy with new cases, new voices. They didn't speak, just stood together, watching the last of the daylight turn the marble golden. For a moment, the city was still. And in that stillness, the silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was presence, memory, witness. A voice once lost had become 1,000, and none of them would ever be erased again. If this story touched you, hit subscribe. And stick around as we keep giving a voice to those who are too often ignored.